Go through the life and times of Leo Tolstoy. I'm not going to go through all the pages, but I want to go through the first few pages, kind of to give you some tips, and there's some parts that I need to fill in notes with. So make sure you have that packet out here. We'll go through it. Life and times of Leo Tolstoy. Now, I know the pages might be a little bit different from what you have than labeled on here just because I revised the packet. Don't worry about that too much. Now, this second kind of page here, or what I list as page 1, right? This is the kind of cover. This is page 1. Let's look at question 1, and I'll give you that as an example. When did Tolstoy live? What do you know about this time period? What was going on in the world? Inventions, war, okay? So I put down a few things. Well, I know that this was roughly 1820s to 1900. This is an era of great change. You have the Industrial Revolution, forming of nation states or empires. You also have the rise of the novel. Now with nation states, right, specifically think about, right, a lot of more European ones, but including Russia. And it also has the divide between landowner and serfs. So this is the era of industrialization, of making nations, big, fantastic changes in the world. You know, looking at the packet, that's some of the things that I drew out from it to answer that question. So what you should do is as you're reading, go ahead and answer some of these. Now the last one, it says, you know, what is the most important clues provided by the resource packet? Expectations for annotations. I'll talk later about that with the Ivan Illich guide, so don't worry about that. But all of these other questions in here, right, you can use as a way to help you. Now, I do want to read through page 2. Okay, so this is an excerpt from a biography, which I found and I really like. But I'll go and read through it. Excerpt from Tolstoy, A Russian Life by Rosamund Bartlett. The sensation of not being able to keep up was commonly felt by Tolstoy's contemporaries, as he left giant footprints in every area of his life. Obviously, I annotated that, so I thought, wow, powerful statement there. After racking up enormous gambling debts as a young man, during which time he conceived and failed to live up to wildly ambitious ideals, he turned to writing extremely long novels and fathering a large number of children. When he went out riding with his sons, he habitually went at such a fast pace they could barely keep up with him. Then he became moral leader to the nation, one of the world's most famous and influential men. A tendency towards the grand scale has been markedly Russian characteristic ever since the time of Ivan the Terrible, creating an enormous multi-ethnic empire by conquering 3 Mongol Khanates in the 16th century. Peter the Great cemented the tradition by making space the defining feature of his new capital of St. Petersburg, which arose in record time out of the Finnish marshes. By the time Catherine the Great died at the end of the 18th century, Russia had also become immensely wealthy. Its aristocrats were able to build lavish palaces and assemble extravagant art collections far grander than their Western counterparts, with lifestyles to match. But Russia's poverty was also on a grand scale, perpetuated by an inhumane caste system in which a tiny minority of westernized nobility ruled over a fettered serf population, made to live in degrading conditions. Tolstoy was both a product of this culture and perhaps its most vivid expression. Whoa, such a great introduction to a biography. But more importantly, if I had you read this on your own, and I know I had students get this wrong later when we had a quiz on it last year, as it talked about how does Tolstoy embody, right, or represent his culture. So looking back, we go back to the first page, right? This is the second question exactly. How should you answer it? Well, if you look here, it talks about the grand scale of things. Think about how big this empire is, multi-ethnic empire, the space and land, but then he says also grand on the scale where you have wealth and poverty. And he says Tolstoy was both a product and perhaps its most vivid expression. For some of us, we can't come and approach this from a small scale. You can't come and read Tolstoy and kind of think, oh, everyone's being nice, how you doing? I'm just greeting you, hi. This is just a nice book about nice people, blah, blah, blah. This is about a people group that have been shaped on a grand scale. Cultural context includes, and I know the page orders might be a little bit different, but you can move around. What else is going on culturally? Well, a social and political reform in the 18th century during Russia, or my 18th and 19th, but more 19th, specifically the class struggle. So if you look at this, it says Ivan Ilyich dies in February 1882 at the age of 45. He would therefore have come of age in the late 1850s, at the beginning of the reign of Tsar Alexander II. It was a period that saw several major social reforms, yet life changed very little, if at all, for the vast majority of Russian subjects. Things remained the way they had for centuries. And now, oh, Mr. McClellan spoiled the book. Oh no. Wow, okay, well, maybe you should read the title. You there have come of age in the late 1850s. So, there was a lot of social reforms, but a lot of things had not changed. Big idea. Now, in 1848, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels' Communist Manifesto defined and criticized the bourgeoisie class. This middle class was not part of the ruling aristocracy, yet held power over production and trade. The manifesto argues that the bourgeoisie gains unjust advantage of the poor or proletariat through financial and material transactions. Recognizing the value of individual liberty, Alexander II abolished serfdom in 1861, providing more wage-earning opportunities for the lower classes. Tolstoy uses Ivan Ilyич's life to explore cultural issues such as economics, civil rights, liberty, what it means to lead an honorable, worthwhile life. Right? So the big point here is, as you're reading the book, right, you should expect things are going to change, right? So it said he would therefore come of age in the late 1850s at the beginning, right? But down here we learn in 1861, right, Tsar Alexander abolishes that. So how does that change Ivan's life would be one natural question we'd ask. And what I want you to think about it by comparison, right, it's like in American literature, right, someone, right, going from pre-Civil War through the Civil War and after, right? Those are such different time periods. The reforms and things that have taken place, right? So those are not just like, 20, 30 years went by, not much has happened. No, huge, massive change within the life of Tolstoy, but also the life of our specific character. Okay. Now, let's talk about the literary landscape. The other big thing is there's the rise of the genre, what people call realism. The death of Ivan Ilyich belongs to the genre of realism, which succeeded the Romantic movement that dominated the first part of the 19th century. Heightened style, epic events, and larger-than-life protagonists, as in Goethe's Faust or Melville's Moby Dick, often characterize romantic narratives. Fiction, in the realistic mode, so compared to the romantic one, by contrast, tends to be written in a straightforward and often plain style to give precise descriptions of the surface of daily life and to focus on ordinary protagonists confronting the same kind of problems that we all face. The controlling assumption of realism is that an accurate depiction of real life is a solid foundation for an exploration of its larger significance. We get a movement here that says, let's depict life as it really happens, but let's be very precise, right? And use plain language. Well, let's not, you're not expecting from realism, right? It'd be like Shakespeare, a balcony scene, right? What we mean by that is we're not expecting this to be young poets exploding with similes, metaphors, allusions all over the place. But it's going to be a very precise and straightforward type of language. Now, realism, this is associated with the novel, right? To realistically capture life. So I want to talk a little more about what that means. Well, first thing is, let's actually go over here. So life for Tolstoy really meant the life of a wealthy landowner. Tolstoy was a product of the upper class, and often his characters wrestled with their roles as the wealthy gentry. So the reason I put this in here is, there's a little bit of debate with realism. Does it actually capture real life, right? And the argument against here would be like, well, that's just the bourgeoisie or kind of the upper class. Right? And there's a good argument. I think, to be fair with Tolstoy, I think he's wrestling with it, and he tries to depict people that are from different classes in Russia. But this is why a lot of people say the great Tolstoy, and then there's Dostoevsky, and people will say those are the two great Russian authors, and you kind of got to have them together because Dostoevsky, in some ways, represents a little bit more from that lower kind of middle class emerging in Russia. Right? Now, Merriam-Webster definition of novel: an invented prose narrative that is usually long and complex, deals especially with human experience through a usually connected sequence of events. For this segment, I know you don't have this handout in your PDF, or you might not have it. Okay? Don't worry about that. Just try to follow along the best that you can. Okay? Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the backdrop of the novel. Okay? Now, the reason being, I'm not going to go through any more of the packet. This is what I expect you to go through. And I'd like to go through more specific characteristics that people associate with a novel. And if you wanted to use your notebook maybe for this, or if you wanted to use in Edmodo, maybe you could add a page or somewhere to take notes. So what I'll do is I'll use kind of a quote from different authors, and then I'll use that as a referencing over here, kind of what specific characteristics that mean. Characteristics it is. So first one, a short story is a love affair, a novel is a marriage, a short story is a photograph, a novel is a film. Big idea here, right? What do we mean by a novel? Long prose fiction, right? This is a work, right, that's going to be long, and that's what the novel is known for. Now, what I want you to note specifically is this is a revolutionary change in terms of literature. What we have talked about before, going back to the Odyssey, is oral culture, okay? And the attempt eventually to record that, right, in which is Homer, he gathers from all the bards, okay, and becomes kind of the Greek bard to record that. And then we see at the epic tradition that developed, where many of these poets along the way, right, craft long poems, typically about their nation or their people group, history, and their identity. Now, the other one that comes along there, we talked about plays or drama. And we saw specifically that develop with Shakespeare, but even with that, there's still the oral component of going and seeing the performance, right? The text is not about what's written on the page, but it's still very much about the performance. Now, the novel comes of an age, right? We often think of, just all books are novels, right? That's not true, right? The novel specifically comes at a time when we've had the changes of the printing press, we've had the ability and access, right, to get cheaper paper and widely distribute that, so people can do these longer works. The novel, right, or a work of prose fiction over 50,000 might not have been possible in previous generations, but now it is. And they have mass printing, and they have mass distribution. Huge change. Why? Reading becomes an individual thing. Okay? Now, that's eventually where it ends up. Now, at the start, it initially wasn't, because in the time period like this, you would actually invite your friends over maybe, and you'd actually read through a novel together. That was a form of entertainment. Okay? But slowly what happened is the novel became more and more about one person really reading alone. Now, there's been people that have kind of tried to change that. The big idea here is, right, what's unique about the novel is, you go home, and it's not just the novel, but, you go home and you read it on your own. And you have that access to it, and then you could go and talk to someone that has another copy. That's a big change and revolution within the world. All right, now, going to the next one. It is only a novel, or in short, only some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of its varieties, liveliest effusions of wit and humor, are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language. The big thing here, human nature. They tend to focus more on the character development than the plot. And specifically what I'd say a character development is the psyche. What I would want you to take away is, and this is somewhat of a debate, there's many authors that argue what the novel is and always will be, is it defined by its looking at the internal psyche and then noticing a small kind of character development. And there's other ones that push back and kind of say you need to have stronger narrative one there, This is Michael Chabon, and that's partially why I like him a lot.